Terran stood at the high gates of the Palace of Zirath, the jewel of the alien empire. His post was simple, yet heavy with meaning. He was a human guard, one of the few allowed inside the walls of the royal home. Long ago, humans had been taken as prisoners, but over time they proved themselves useful and loyal. Some were servants, some were workers, and a very small number, like Terran, were trained to stand guard. The palace was unlike anything Terran had ever seen before he was brought here. Its tall towers shone with crystal light, and wide bridges floated in the air, held by energy that seemed like magic. Aliens with scaled skin, sharp eyes, and proud walk moved across the halls. Among them, humans always looked small and plain. Yet, Terran knew his place was important, for he guarded Queen Myra herself. Myra was not like the others of her kind. Where the nobles were proud and distant, she was calm and thoughtful. She often spoke kindly to those who served her, and many whispered that her wisdom was the true strength of the empire. Terran had seen her only a few times up close, when she passed through the garden or the Silver Hall, yet even then he felt a sense of respect. The day seemed like any other. Soldiers of the Royal Guard marched in their shining armor, and the sound of alien horns filled the air as a ceremony ended in the central plaza. But Terran noticed something strange. Near the Queen's private chamber, shadows moved where none should be. He was trained to watch, to see small details, and his eyes caught the figure of a servant slipping a mark on the door before hurrying away. Terran's heart grew uneasy. He said nothing at first. Humans were expected to stay silent unless spoken to. But when he returned to his post, the thought kept returning. Why mark the Queen's chamber door? It was not the way of normal servants. That evening, as the twin moons of Zirath rose above the sky, Terran walked slowly past the hall again. He saw two figures, covered in dark cloaks, standing close to the chamber. They spoke in low voices, words sharp and dangerous. Terran could not hear everything, but one sentence reached him clearly. When she enters, it will be done. His chest tightened. The words echoed in his mind. Who were they speaking of, if not the Queen herself? He stepped back into the shadows before they could see him. His hands trembled, but not from fear. He felt something stronger, something that told him he could not stand still. Terran thought of what this meant. The Queen's life was in danger, and yet he was only a human guard. If he spoke out and was wrong, he could be punished, even executed. But if he stayed silent and the Queen fell, he would carry the weight of his silence forever. That night, he could not rest. He walked the length of the palace garden, the silver leaves shining under moonlight. He kept seeing Myra's face in his mind, calm and kind. She had once smiled at him when he bowed, a smile no other noble had ever given to a human. That memory gave him courage. When the Queen came into the garden the next day, surrounded by her attendants, Terran felt his chance was there. He stepped forward carefully, lowering his head, but his voice was steady. "My Queen," he said softly, so that only she could hear. "Do not enter your chamber tonight. Danger waits for you inside." Myra stopped. Her eyes, deep and bright, fixed on him. No one had ever spoken to her in such a way. Her attendants frowned, ready to push the human guard aside, but she raised her hand to stop them. "What danger do you speak of?" she asked, her tone calm but sharp with interest. Terran looked up, his eyes filled with honesty. "I saw men waiting by your door. I heard them speak. They plan to harm you. Please, trust my word, even if I am only a guard." For a long moment, silence filled the garden. The attendants shifted uneasily, and even the wind seemed to pause. Myra studied the young human, searching his face for falsehood. She found none. At last, she spoke, her voice low. "You are brave to speak this, Terran. If your warning is true, you may have saved my life." Terran bowed deeply, his heart steady now. He had done what he must. Whether the queen believed him or not, he had spoken the truth. And so the seed of trust was planted, one that would soon grow into a bond stronger than the walls of Zurith itself. Queen Myra did not dismiss Terran's words. All through that day, his warning stayed in her mind. She moved through the halls with grace as always, but inside she was uneasy. Her husband, King Vayrad, was proud and strong. He had ruled the empire with power for many years. Could it be possible that such a ruler, her own husband, would wish to harm her? That night she avoided her chamber, pretending to retire as usual but instead slipping quietly into a hidden passage behind the silver hall. Few knew of the passage, and even fewer dared to use it. From there, she had a clear view of her own chamber door. What she saw filled her heart with cold fear. Two cloaked figures waited by the door, just as Terran had warned. Their posture was tense, their hands ready on their blades. Myra did not need to hear their words this time. The truth was clear. Danger waited inside her chamber, and had she walked in as always, her life might have ended. The queen held her breath, her mind racing. Why would they do this? Who had ordered it? Her heart whispered an answer she did not want to believe. The king himself. Myra had seen the change in Vayrad over the past months. He had grown restless, always speaking of conquest and war, no longer listening to her counsel of peace. She had tried to guide him, to calm his thirst for power, but he had turned colder. Now, watching the cloaked guards at her door, she felt the weight of betrayal pressing against her chest. When dawn broke, Myra returned to her private garden, still hidden from most of the court. She called for Terran to step forward. The human bowed deeply, unsure if his warning had been believed. "You spoke the truth," Myra said at last, her voice steady. "I saw them with my own eyes. Your words saved me." Terran lifted his head, relief washing over him. "My queen, I could not stay silent. To guard you means more than to simply stand at your door." Myra studied him with care. She had always thought humans simple, weak compared to her kind, but this one showed courage that few nobles dared. He had risked his life to tell her the truth. If the king learned of Terran's words, the human would surely be punished, perhaps worse. Yet still he had spoken. "Tell me all that you saw," she said. Terran explained how he had noticed the mark on her chamber door, how he had heard the words whispered in the dark. Myra listened without interrupting, her eyes fixed on him. When he finished, she nodded slowly. "You understand what this means," she said. Terran hesitated. "It means there is betrayal within the palace. But I cannot name who leads it." Myra's gaze turned cold. "I can. Only one would dare such a step, and that is the king himself." The words hung heavy in the air. Terran lowered his head. He had thought it, but hearing the queen speak it aloud made it real. "Then you are in danger every moment," Terran said firmly. "We must act before it is too late." The queen almost smiled at his words. A human, speaking as if he shared her burden. Yet she found comfort in it. "What do you suggest, guard?" Terran's heart raced. He was only a human, with no power or rank. Yet here stood the queen of the empire, asking his counsel. He spoke carefully. "If the king means to strike, he will not stop. He will spread lies, saying you are ill, or worse. But if we can prove his betrayal before the court, his power will crumble. Myra listened, her thoughts deep. She had allies among the nobles, though fewer than before. If she could show them the truth, they might rise with her. But the risk was great. Vayrad still held the throne, and many feared him more than they respected her. You speak boldly, Myra said at last. Perhaps more boldly than any human should. Yet your courage may be the key. Terran bowed again, but this time with pride. I will do whatever is needed, my queen. The queen looked at him, and for the first time, she saw not a servant but a guard in truth. A protector. That night, Myra did not enter her chamber again. Instead, she ordered her most trusted attendant to watch it from afar. The report came back quickly. The cloaked figures had returned, waiting once more. The plot was still alive. Myra felt the storm rising. The empire itself might soon shake. And at the heart of it all stood a single human guard who had dared to speak the warning. Queen Myra walked slowly through the grand halls of the palace, her mind heavy with doubt. The morning light poured through the crystal windows, yet it brought no comfort. She had seen with her own eyes the cloaked figures by her chamber door. She had heard Terran's words, full of honesty. Still, a voice inside her heart fought against the thought that her husband, King Vayrad, would plan her death. They had ruled together for many years. Once, he had trusted her wisdom and listened when she spoke of peace and justice. Now he turned from her counsel, listening instead to flatterers who urged him to expand the empire through conquest. Could such a change lead him to betray even her? Myra wanted to believe there was another answer, some hidden hand at work, but every sign pointed toward the king himself. She felt as if a blade rested upon her neck, unseen but sharp. That evening she chose not to enter her chamber again. Instead, she moved through the hidden passage and waited in silence. Her breath was steady, though her heart pounded. When the hour was late, she saw them. The cloaked men entered her chamber with quiet steps, blades drawn. They searched the room, waiting for her. Her doubts ended there. It was no mistake, no misunderstanding. Someone wanted her dead, and the order came from high above. Myra withdrew before she could be discovered. She returned to the garden, where the silver trees whispered in the night breeze. There she found Terran, standing guard as always. He looked up as she approached, bowing low. "My queen," he said softly. Myra studied him with careful eyes. "Your words were true. I saw it myself. They wait for me, not once but twice. Whoever commands them will not rest until I am gone." Terran's face hardened. "Then you cannot remain unguarded. The palace itself has turned unsafe." She gave a bitter smile. A queen, unsafe in her own home. How far the empire has fallen. She paused, then added, "Tell me, Terran, why do you risk yourself for me? You are a human, and many of my kind still see your people as little more than tools." Terran met her gaze without fear. "Because truth matters. Because honor matters. If I stay silent and you fall, then I have no honor. My life has meaning only if I use it to protect what is right." Myra felt a strange warmth in her chest. She had heard many noble words from lords and generals, but none had struck her heart like those spoken by this human guard. Still, she could not shake her doubt. "If you are right, then the king himself plots against me. He is powerful, feared, and ruthless. What can one human and one queen do against the weight of an empire?" Terran did not flinch. "We do not need to fight the empire. We need only to show the truth. Once the court sees his betrayal, his throne will shake. Myra walked among the silver trees, her hands clasped behind her back. She thought of the nobles who once stood with her, and how many had drifted toward the king's side. Fear held them. Power bound them. Yet if the truth were revealed, perhaps courage would return. She turned back to Terran. You speak with fire, yet the path ahead is dark. If I fail, the empire will fall into ruin, and you may lose your life. Terran bowed again. A life lost for truth is better than a life lived in silence. Her eyes lingered on him. For the first time, Myra felt she was not alone in her struggle. A single human guard now stood as her ally, stronger in spirit than many of her own kind. That night, she decided to test the depth of his loyalty. She shared with him the secret signs used by her closest attendants, signals that could move messages without being noticed. With these, Terran could watch and report without raising suspicion. Together they formed a small plan. Terran would follow the steps of the king's secret allies, while Myra would prepare her own circle of trust. It was dangerous, but the truth could not remain hidden forever. As Terran left to begin his quiet task, Myra watched him disappear into the shadows of the palace. She felt the storm rising around her. Betrayal had pierced her heart, but in the midst of it, hope had appeared in the form of a single human. And though doubt still lingered in her soul, one thing was clear. The guard named Terran had become more than a servant. He had become her shield. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Queen Myra kept her calm face before the court, but inside she carried the weight of betrayal. The king grew colder with each passing day, speaking less to her and more to his circle of advisors. He announced new plans for conquest, ignoring her counsel of peace. The empire seemed ready to march into endless war. Terran continued his quiet watch. He listened in shadowed corners, followed servants who hurried too quickly, and studied the movement of the guards. He was careful not to draw attention, yet his eyes missed little. The more he learned, the clearer it became. The king's hand moved behind every shadow. One night, Terran brought news to Myra in the garden. "My queen," he said softly, "the king speaks of you as if you are already gone. He tells the nobles that you have fallen ill, and that soon you will leave the palace. He prepares the way for your absence." Myra's face grew pale. "So it begins. He wishes to silence me before I can speak the truth." Terran's voice was firm. "Then we cannot wait. We must act before his lies spread further." Myra looked at him with tired eyes. "What would you have me do, Terran? I am but one queen, and my enemies grow stronger." The human bowed his head, then raised it with steady resolve. "You are not alone. I may be only a guard, but my word carries truth. There are other humans in the palace, serving in silence. They hear things the nobles ignore. With their help, we can move messages, block passages, and guard your steps. And I believe there are still those among your own kind who remain loyal to you." Myra studied him for a long moment. She had ruled for many years, yet it was this young human who spoke to her with such fire. His courage seemed to shine brighter than the crystal lights of the palace. At last she nodded. "Very well. Bring them to me, but do so with care. We cannot let the king see our hand too soon." Over the next few days, Terran quietly gathered a circle of humans who worked in the palace. Some were cooks, some were cleaners, others were low guards like him. They had little power, but they listened and obeyed with loyalty. Myra also reached out to a few trusted nobles, those who had once stood with her in council. They came in secret, speaking only at night under the silver trees. In those hidden meetings, a plan began to form. If the king meant to claim her death before the court, then she would appear alive before them. Not only alive, but armed with proof of his betrayal. The thought was dangerous, yet it was the only way to break his power. Terran spoke clearly at one of the gatherings. We cannot match his army with strength. But we can show his lies. When the people see that he plotted against his own queen, they will turn from him. Even the proudest lord cannot stand when truth is laid bare. Myra listened, her heart steadying. She had doubted before, but now she felt the weight lifting. This human guard, small in body but great in spirit, gave her the courage she needed. You speak with more honor than many who wear crowns, she said softly. From this day, Terran, you are no longer only a guard. You are my shield. Terran bowed deeply, but pride filled his heart. For a moment he thought of his people, once seen as weak, and he wondered if this path would change their fate. The queen then spoke to her circle. We will wait for the assembly, when the king gathers the nobles to hear his words. There, before them all, I will show myself alive. And if he dares to strike, then his mask will fall. The risk was great, and all knew it. Yet no one turned away. The humans bowed to their queen, and the loyal nobles swore to stand with her. As the night grew quiet, Myra walked beside Terran. You have given me hope when I had none, she said. If the day is lost, remember this. You have already saved me once, and for that I will never forget. Terran answered with steady voice. The day will not be lost, my queen. Truth will stand. And in that moment, under the silver leaves, queen and guard walked side by side, bound not by rank or blood, but by courage and trust. The palace of Zirith seemed calm from the outside, yet within its crystal walls tension grew like a hidden flame. King Vayrad moved with confidence, his voice loud in the court, his plans for conquest bold and endless. He told the nobles that Queen Myra was weak, that her health failed her, and that soon she would no longer appear before them. Many believed his words, but whispers spread quickly. Terran and the queen watched these changes with sharp eyes. Each day brought more signs of the king's plan. Servants carried messages at strange hours. New guards took places near the queen's chamber, men who served the king directly and not her. It was clear that the final step of betrayal would come soon. In the secret meetings under the silver trees, Myra's circle of trust gathered. Humans, once silent workers, now carried messages from hall to hall. Loyal nobles came with news of the court. Together, they built a plan to face the king. One evening, Terran reported what he had learned. The king calls for a great assembly in 3 days. He will stand before the nobles and declare you gone from power. Some believe he will say you are dead, others that you have stepped aside. Either way, he means to claim the throne fully for himself. Myra's face was calm, but her voice was firm. Then we shall not hide. On that day, I will stand before the court, alive. His lies will shatter. The nobles looked at her with doubt and fear. One of them, Lord Saran, spoke. My queen, if you reveal yourself, he may strike at you openly. He will not fear to show violence if cornered. Myra turned her eyes to Terran. What say you, guard? Terran bowed his head, then raised it with steady fire. If he strikes at you before the court, then every noble will see the truth. His mask will fall, and the empire will know what he has become. We must face him, no matter the cost. The queen nodded. Then it is decided. For the next 3 days, the palace was filled with quiet preparation. Terran and his fellow humans moved carefully, blocking secret passages the king's men might use, carrying hidden notes to allies, and placing trusted guards at key doors. They worked like shadows, unseen but steady. Myra prepared as well. She chose a simple robe of silver thread, not the heavy crown of state. She wished to appear not as a figure of power, but as a symbol of truth. She spoke softly to her attendants, telling them to stand ready. If the storm came, they must not falter. On the night before the assembly, Terran stood once more in the garden, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. The queen came to him, her face lit by the glow of the twin moons. "Do you fear what tomorrow may bring?" she asked. Terran answered with calm voice. "I fear nothing, my queen, except silence. Tomorrow, the truth will speak." Myra gave him a small smile. "You speak as if you were born for this, Terran. Yet you are a human in an alien court. Do you not see the weight upon you?" He looked at her firmly. "I see it. But I also see what must be done. My people may be small in the eyes of the empire, but courage belongs to all, not only to the mighty. If one human can stand for truth, then perhaps the way will open for others." The queen's heart warmed at his words. She reached out her hand, placing it gently on his shoulder. "Then stand with me tomorrow, not as a servant, but as my guard in truth." "I will stand," Terran said. The dawn came, and with it, the rising storm. The great assembly filled the hall of crystal pillars. Nobles gathered in their bright robes, soldiers lined the walls in gleaming armor. At the center stood King Vayrad, tall and proud, his voice ready to claim full power. But hidden among the crowd, ready and waiting, was Queen Myra. At her side stood Terran, his eyes steady, his hand near his blade. The storm was about to break. The grand assembly of Zereth shone with light, yet the air was heavy with unease. Nobles filled the crystal hall, their robes glittering, their whispers sharp. Soldiers lined the walls, silent but tense. At the center stood King Vayrad, tall in his dark armor, his crown shining like fire. His voice carried strong as he raised his hand for silence. "Lords of the Empire," Vayrad declared, "you stand today to witness change. The Queen is no longer fit to guide us. Her strength is gone, her voice broken. From this day, the Empire shall have one ruler, one will, one throne." A murmur spread through the hall. Some nobles bowed their heads quickly, eager to show loyalty. Others frowned, unease in their eyes. But before Vayrad could continue, a clear voice rose from the far end of the hall. "I am not gone. I stand before you now." Every head turned. Gasps filled the chamber. Queen Myra walked forward, her silver robe glowing under the crystal lights. She moved with calm steps, yet her presence filled the hall with power. At her side walked Terran, the human guard, his hand resting on his blade, his gaze fixed on the king. The nobles whispered fiercely. "The queen is alive. She was meant to be ill." "What is this trick?" Vayrad's face hardened. For a moment, his mask slipped, and cold anger burned in his eyes. Still, he tried to keep his voice calm. "My queen," he said loudly, "your place is in your chamber. Why come here unannounced?" Myra's voice was steady. "I come because truth must be spoken. You told this court I was gone, yet I stand here. You placed men at my door to end my life. Do you deny it before these witnesses?" The hall grew silent. Every noble looked to the king. Vayrad's jaw tightened. He could feel the ground shift beneath him. If he admitted nothing, suspicion would still grow. If he denied it, and she had proof, his throne would crack. At last, Pride overcame caution. He drew his blade in one swift motion, its edge shining with dark light. "You dare accuse me before my court," he thundered. "Then let them see who holds true power." The nobles gasped, some stepping back in fear. But before Vayrad could strike, Terran moved. The human stepped in front of the queen, his own blade drawn, his stance firm. He was smaller than the alien king, weaker in body, yet his courage burned bright. "You will not touch her," Terran said, his voice like iron. The hall shook with the clash as steel met steel. Vayrad struck with heavy blows, his strength greater than any human could match. But Terran was quick, his training sharp, his purpose unshakable. Each strike he blocked, each step he held. The nobles watched in shock as a mere human stood against their king. All around, the queen's allies moved. Loyal guards drew their blades to protect her, while the king's men rushed to his side. The crystal hall became a storm of shouts and steel. Humans, once unseen, now fought with fierce courage, standing beside the queen's few loyal nobles. Myra did not hide. She stood tall at the center, her voice rising above the chaos. "Look upon your king. He raises his hand against his own queen, against truth itself. Will you follow such a ruler, or will you stand for justice?" Her words struck the nobles like thunder. Many hesitated, torn between fear and honor. Some threw down their blades, choosing to step back. Others joined the queen's side, raising their voices in support. Still the battle raged. Vayrad pressed forward, his power great, but Terran refused to fall. His arms shook, his breath grew heavy, yet his eyes never wavered. He fought not for glory, not for himself, but for the queen and the truth she carried. At last, with a sudden twist, Terran locked blades with the king and forced him back a step. The hall echoed with gasps. Never before had a human guard pushed the mighty king even an inch. The clash was far from over, but the tide had begun to turn. The nobles had seen the mask fall. The queen was alive, and her human guard stood unbroken. The empire itself now trembled, waiting to see who would rise from the storm. The hall of crystal pillars trembled with the echoes of battle. Nobles watched in awe as the human guard, Terran, faced the mighty king, Vayrad. The clash of blades had ended, and now silence fell, heavy and electric. Every eye turned to see what would come next. King Vayrad's chest heaved with anger and disbelief. His strength was unmatched, yet one human had held against him, protecting the queen. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of doubt. His allies, some still loyal, now hesitated, uncertain where truth lay. Queen Myra stepped forward, her silver robe glowing in the morning light that spilled through the crystal windows. Her calm eyes swept the hall. She did not carry a weapon, yet her presence alone radiated power. "Look upon him," Myra said, her voice clear and strong. "This man, a human guard, has stood for truth when fear ruled many. He has risked his life for justice, while the king sought to strike at his own queen. What power is greater than honor, than courage, than loyalty?" A hush filled the room. The nobles shifted uneasily. Some whispered to each other, realizing the truth that had been hidden in shadows. The king's mask of strength began to crumble before their eyes. Vayrad lifted his head, fury in his eyes, but even he could not deny what the court had seen. His blade hung at his side, but his hands trembled. The weight of the empire's judgment pressed upon him. Terran stepped forward. His stance was calm, his voice steady. "My king, the court has seen your deeds. The queen stands alive because truth and courage guided her steps. You cannot rule through fear while hiding betrayal behind your throne. The people of this empire deserve better. The nobles murmured, some nodding in agreement. Their fear of Vayrad began to fade, replaced by respect for the queen and the human who protected her. One by one, lords stepped aside, no longer willing to support a ruler who struck at his own. Vayrad's anger became desperation. You dare judge me, all of you, he roared, but the hall no longer shook with his authority. His words fell flat. The empire had witnessed the truth. Queen Myra's voice rose again. The throne belongs not to one who rules by fear. It belongs to one who honors justice, protects the people, and stands for truth. Today, the empire has seen who truly deserves respect. Let this judgment be clear. Humans, once servants and unseen, now have proven their honor. And courage, wherever it is found, will always rise. With those words, the court seemed to shift. The nobles, inspired by the queen's courage and the bravery of a single human, stepped back, refusing to obey the king's command. His power, though great, had no support. Vayrad lowered his head in defeat. His throne remained, but the empire had turned away from him. His allies melted into the crowd, no longer willing to fight for a ruler who had lost honor. He had been tested, and he had failed. Myra looked at Terran, her eyes bright with gratitude. One human guard has shown more honor than 1,000 nobles, she said softly. You have not only saved me, Terran, but you have saved the empire from shadows. For that, you shall always have my trust. Terran bowed deeply. I serve not for reward, my queen. I serve because it is right. That is enough for me. The assembly broke, not in chaos, but in quiet reverence. The empire had witnessed courage, loyalty, and truth. Humans, once treated as weak and small, were now respected as brave allies. Myra's rule would continue, stronger and wiser, with the knowledge that honor and courage could come from anyone. In the days that followed, the empire celebrated its new chapter. Queen Myra restored justice, guided by wisdom, and surrounded herself with loyal allies. Humans rose in trust and respect, no longer hidden in shadows. Tales of Terran, the human guard who saved the queen, spread across Zereth and beyond. And though battles might come again, one truth remained: courage is not measured by size or species, but by heart. One human, steadfast and brave, had changed the course of an empire. The legend of Terran, the human who stood for truth, would be remembered for generations, a shining example of how even the smallest among us can rise to greatness. The empire had seen its future, and it was bright.